Hi everyone, and welcome back to Dig Deeper, the series where we take a different tool out of the Bible reading toolbox each week and we see how does that help us get to know God better. This week it's the vocabulary tool. Every subject has its own special words that it uses. If you watch YouTube a lot, you'll know exactly what I mean when I say ring that bell below. You'll know that it means if you clicked on the bell-shaped notification icon underneath this video, you'll be notified, you'll be alerted every single time we upload a brand new video. If you don't watch a lot of YouTube, that will have been a meaningless phrase to you. Every single subject has its own specialist words. The Bible is no different. And so the vocabulary tool is asking the basic question, what does this Bible author mean by that word? This tool is all about the words that Bible authors use and being particularly careful not to kind of import our own understanding on those words. It's possible, for example, that when a Bible author uses a word like judgment, they could be using it in a different way to how you or I might. And if we're not aware of that, then we could really get mixed up and come to some wrong conclusions about what they're really saying. Not being careful about words might mean that we make all kinds of mistakes and just not really realise it. And that's why the vocabulary tool is so helpful. Just like every other tool we've been using, this isn't just a Bible thing. In fact, this is something that we do all the time without thinking about it. For example, if I use the word battery, I could be talking about one of these. This small thing that powers my electronic devices. It'd be totally reasonable to assume that that's what I was talking about, and in fact almost all the time you'd probably be bang on right. But if you're reading a newspaper headline, it's much more likely that battery is something like a violent attack, victim battered in shop. But even then the context is going to make a big difference. Unlikely to be in the newspaper perhaps, but what if the victim was this delicious piece of cod and the shop was harbour fish and chips? The word batter means something very different in that kind of context. But even if we all knew we were talking about the crime battery, it's going to mean different things depending on the context then. In my law essay at university, a battery meant something quite specific. Any intentional touching of another person without the consent of that person and without lawful excuse. So that could mean something like taking a piece of gum and putting it in the hair of the boy in front. A world away from the savage beating that you or I might have in our minds, but actually that would definitely constitute a battery. Words really matter and context changes everything. See our video on the context tool for more. Now this all might sound quite confusing. As we're going to see though, the vocabulary tool doesn't mean you need a PhD in ancient Greek or something. It just means thinking carefully before jumping to conclusions about what a word may or may not mean. So the question is, how can we use the vocabulary tool? Well, the very first thing that you could do if you come across a verse in the Bible that just doesn't make sense to you is read it carefully and slowly and see if there's particular words that you might be misunderstanding or it might be good to look at in more detail. You could crack open some kind of Bible dictionary, maybe a tool online, and it's possible that that would give you a definition that would just clear things up for you, help give you a bit more understanding of what the word could mean. Even there though, there's a kind of subtle danger that it's worth being aware of. It's really obvious, probably doesn't need saying, but theology textbooks aren't the same thing as the Bible. And so while they're trying to be really helpful and give you a definition of probably what the whole Bible is saying about a particular word, it's possible it's not the exact meaning in the verse that you're looking at. For that reason, the question to ask is, what does this Bible author mean by this Bible word in this verse? It's just another shout out to the king of tools, the author's purpose tool. And that's because it's just possible that the Bible author is using this word in a slightly different way to the theology textbook that you're reading. I've heard this put in a really memorable way. Bible words have Bible meanings. I hope that's helpful for you. One thing that I often do that I think is really useful is to use a kind of searchable Bible online and type in the word that you're struggling with. It'll come up with every time that word's been used in the Bible. Obviously, you could look at what other Bible authors have used for that word, and sometimes that'll be helpful, but you have to be careful because the context can be a bit different, as we've been saying. What's really useful is to see, has this Bible author used this word before? Those places could be really helpful in just getting you unstuck and having some more context to work with when you're trying to work out what does this word mean exactly. So that's the vocabulary tool. What does this author mean by this word? It's a particularly useful one if you get stuck on what a particular verse means. Why not reach for this tool and see if it gets you out of a jam? And I'll see you again next week for our next Bible reading tool.